I just want to know what you feel, Steve, in terms of a general election. Would it really be in your favour for one to be called very soon?
Well, I think it would be in the country's interests, actually, because we need, after these past, it's nearly been a year now, scandal after scandal after scandal, this country desperately needs new leadership. Now, first of all, we have the Owen Paterson scandal, when Boris Johnson tried to change the rules over inappropriate and rule-breaking lobbying. Then we had Partygate scandal, when Boris Johnson was mocking the sacrifices of the British people by allowing parties to be held at 10 Downing Street. Now we've had the Pincher scandal, where Boris Johnson promoted somebody despite knowing that he had been accused and admitted to being a predatory sexual abuser. All of this is absolutely shocking. And what it's involved the government in doing, and Conservative ministers in doing, is touring the TV studios, covering up Boris Johnson's lies and law-breaking, all of which means they're not focusing on the real priorities of the British people, which is the cost of living crisis. Right now, we've got the highest rates of inflation for 30 years, the highest levels of personal taxation for 50 years, the worst decade for wage growth since the Great Depression in the 1930s, and the government's priority is covering up Boris Johnson's lies and law-breaking. And quite frankly, this cannot go on. The British people deserve better than this.
Well, look, one of the things I know that you wanted to talk about, Steve, was about scamming. And I talked to Emily Thornberry about this yesterday. And you just believe, in terms of new technology and scamming, people are being left unprotected. There's not enough law. There's not enough attention being paid to this sort of thing. And I'm going to quote you here. And you say you accuse the Conservatives of waving the white flag to scammers. But there's no white flag over number 10, is there, at the moment?
Well, I mean, what we're speaking about here, this is one of those issues that increasingly is of importance and a genuine threat to British people. But the Conservatives have done nothing about it because they're not focused on the British people. They're focused on saving their own skins. And to put it in a nutshell, over the last 10 years, the number of reports to the police of online fraud has gone up 1,000%. But the number of prosecutions in court has gone down by 3/4. And that's because the government has cut police, they've cut investment in fraud teams that could be identifying this, and they've closed down the courts. And people are losing online to scammers thousands of pounds now. We even had Kwasi Kwarteng, one of the government's ministers, the Secretary of State for Business, going on the TV and telling people that fraud didn't really matter because it wasn't a real crime. It's actually the biggest form of crime in our country today, but we've got a government that doesn't care about it. They're too focused on covering up for Boris Johnson's lies and law-breaking to deal with the things that matter to the British people. And that is why we're saying this country desperately needs new leadership. Now, there doesn't have to be a general election, Eamon, for another 2 years. That is in the gift of the Prime Minister. But the rumours at Westminster, circulating in the Tory end of the tea rooms, is that the Prime Minister, to save his own skin, if he feels he's going to be deposed, may call the snap general election. Well, that will then put the ball in the court of the British people. And I think, given the misery and the indignity that this debased Prime Minister has heaped on our country over these last few years, they will take their own view about who they want to be running the country and taking us forward into the future.
But, Steve, the Conservatives may not be the only party having to deal with new leadership. I was talking here to Sam Lister, who's the Deputy Political Editor at the Daily Express, in the studio, and we were pondering what could happen to Keir Starmer. This week he said he will resign if he gets a summons. So is this an active topic of conversation? It has to be, and a concern within your own party.
Well, it would be if he got a fixed penalty notice rather than a summons. But the point you're making there is the point of difference between Keir Starmer's Labour Party and Boris Johnson's Conservatives, because the Conservatives believe the laws are for the little people and that it's fine for the Prime Minister to break the law and then get away with it. Keir Starmer and the Labour Party believe that the law should apply to everybody. And if he was found to have been in breach of those lockdown rules, then he would resign as leader of the Labour Party. One party believes in the rule of law. The other party believes they're above the law. And again, what a point of difference that would be to the British people. I don't believe Keir's going to get fine. From what I know about what happened in Durham, it was a work event. Seems pretty clear to me. But if the police decided otherwise and issued a fixed penalty notice, well, Keir said what he will do, and he's right to do that, because all of us in public life, in Parliament, have to uphold the rule of law. To the Tories, it doesn't matter. You can break it at will. The laws are for the little people, and we cannot go on with a government like that because it breaches trust in government, which is what this debased Conservative government has been doing.
Steve, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, he may well be in Downing Street this morning, watching his telly, listening to his radio, and hearing you. What would you say to him as he sits there and ponders whether to make up his mind on staying or going?
I think Boris Johnson is absolutely shameless, and for the good of the country now, so that Parliament, the government, all of us can focus on what really matters to the British people, the cost of living crisis, perhaps above all. He needs to get out of the way, and we desperately need new leadership.
I think David Miller's itching to ask you something here.
Well, I think the interesting thing is that, be careful what you wish for. If Boris Johnson goes, and by the way, I'm probably even less of a fan of Boris Johnson than you are, so we unite in his unsuitability. But if he goes and some nice person that your mother, whose mother is proud of him or her, becomes leader, most of the foxes that you're trying to shoot will be shot for you, won't they? And that's going to leave you having to mount an election campaign potential, run up to an election, without Boris to blame for everything. It's not an enviable situation, is it?
Yeah, well, we agree on Boris, for sure. I'm not sure I agree with the rest of what you're saying, because I think this has gone on for so long now. It was the entire cabinet who covered up for Boris Johnson while he was lying, while he was breaking the law, while he was mocking the sacrifices of the British people during the lockdown. And it was the Tory parliamentary party who rallied round him just a few weeks ago when they had a vote of confidence. And Boris Johnson was able to walk out of that meeting claiming he had a fresh mandate from his own MPs. So I'm afraid he's a debased Prime Minister, but he's debased his party, and they've backed him, I'm afraid. So whoever they elect as leader will be held to account. And they've all been part, leave aside the scandals, David, they've all been part of a government that has ended up giving us the highest rates of personal taxation for 50 years, highest rates of inflation for 30 years, and the lowest growth of any country, any of the major 20 economies in the world, apart from Russia, which is subject to major international sanctions. They've all got that round their necks. So, if there's an election, I think we stand a good chance with that record to oppose.